So this is basically what Valentino has been up to. I bought Valentino Uomo Born in Roma Ivory, and I'm gonna try it out for the first time. I paid about 130 bucks for 100 ml of this. They didn't have any 50 mils, but that was with a coupon. So this is a bit more expensive than that. So if you're a subscriber, then you know that I'm a big fan of the Valentino Uomo line. I did a complete Uomo comparison. I'm gonna link to it somewhere above and in the description below, so make sure you check it out. I'm very curious if the new Ivory is going to be among some of my absolute favorites in the line. So this is the bottle, and as you can see, the design is pretty much identical to the other ones. I kind of like the pure white though. The cap, however, even though it's plastic like the other ones, does look a bit on the cheap side. To me, the juicy side is all that matters, but I'm happy that they finally went with some twist to that bottle, i.e. this color, because I do dislike having to go by the color of the juice when trying to identify the different bottles when we're reaching for them. So we have bergamot at the top, lavender at the heart with fireplace accord, and woody notes at the base. So note-wise, this definitely looks quite different if you compare it to the other in the line. I'm gonna guess the lavender is pretty much the same as in some of the previous releases. However, that fireplace fire accord is really interesting. So without further ado, let's try it up in the air first. Okay, up in air, something sort of a creamy, sort of a milky, and slightly smoky. And up in air, this smells quite different if I compare it to the other ones. At least up in air, I'm getting whiffs of lavender together with something slightly sort of a smoky, and there's something sort of a milky or creamy about it. I actually really like this up in air, but it's on skin really that truly matters, so let's try it out. Okay, slightly different on skin. This on skin, definitely a tiny bit of citrus, but to me already in the opening, the bergamot is quite soft and giving room for the lavender. And I mean, this is just based on my first impressions of it, but it feels like everything in Born in Roma Ivory is moving quite fast. So even though it's just like a minute or two since I sprayed it on my skin, it feels like this is turning into something that is a bit woody and slightly smoky. The lavender is definitely pushing through the most with a bit of creamy woodiness in the background, and there's a hint of something sort of smoky about it. And already like 2 or 3 minutes into it, there's quite a creamy feel to the whole thing. Right away, Born in Roma Ivory, based on my very first impressions of it, it definitely feels quite unique and quite different if you compare it to all of the other ones. And I think my guess was wrong when it comes to the lavender, or it's the sort of a creamy woodiness and the hint of smokiness that gives that lavender a different feel if you compare it to the lavender in some of the other fragrances in the line. And the more Born in Roma Ivory goes into the dry down, the more I feel the whole thing changes into something that to my nose is mostly woody with quite a prominent dose of smokiness to it. The woodiness here is quite creamy and smooth. There's almost like a sort of a milky feel to its creaminess. The smokiness here is definitely quite interesting because this definitely has quite a prominent dose of smokiness to it. However, if I compare its smokiness to other smoky fragrances, then this is smoky, but smoky done in what I think is a more sort of a mass appealing way. So I don't think this is brutally super heavy or super smoky raw. And I really wouldn't expect anything else from Valentino and this line. The whole line is quite a mass appealing one, and I do feel that even though this stands out quite a bit from the other ones in the line, and even though it has quite a prominent dose of smokiness to it, its smokiness and the overall composition is definitely woody and smoky, but woody and smoky done in a way that most people will enjoy. It's definitely not as mass appealing as the smoky tobacco in something like Core of Fantasy, but this is definitely not something smoky that will scare people away. And even though I wish the lavender would have had more sort of a pop to it and more intensity, I still feel the lavender helps bringing the whole thing a really nice dose of freshness and something sort of airy about it, even though this is not a super fresh or super airy kind of scent. So what's the vibe of Born Aroma Ivory? This gives me a different kind of sexy vibe if I compare it to something like Core Fantasy. This is a mix of something sort of a cozy, a bit classy with a flirty and sexy vibe to it. So here are my initial thoughts on compliments and mass appeal. This will most likely not be as mass appealing and as compliment getting as something in the line like Core Fantasy or Born Aroma Intense. However, this is definitely a head turner kind of scent, and this is definitely something that will bring in compliments. I know some will say that this thing, Born Aroma Ivory, stinks with its smokiness, but I do find its smokiness to be more of the mass appealing kind, and I do feel the lavender helps in balancing up its smokiness together with the woodiness. Yes, this thing is smoky, but I do not find its smokiness to be something that is challenging. I really gotta wear it more to get a proper feel for the performance. However, based on how it lingers on my skin and how it stays in the air around me, it's definitely not super strong, but I'm gonna say somewhere above average. So here are my initial thoughts on usage, so like seasons and occasions, even though I think this might smell really good with a bit of warmth. The overall vibe with its woodiness, warmth and smokiness definitely makes this lean more towards like spring, fall and winter. As for occasions, date nights and going out for sure, when you want something that's a bit different compared to a lot of other scents out there. Or like fall and winter days when you want something warm, cozy, woody and smoky on you. In other words, Born Aroma Ivory will not be the first scent that I think of on a super warm summer day or when going to the gym. So who's Born Aroma Ivory for? This is when it starts to get a bit tricky, because I do feel a lot of people, especially if you're used to what's been previously released in this line, and if you're not used to sort of a smoky sense, will definitely dislike this. So if you absolutely dislike any kind of smokiness, then definitely stay away. I do feel this is for someone who wants something that's a bit different. If you're used to and enjoy woody and smoky fragrances, then you most likely find this to be an interesting one. And even though to my nose its smokiness is something that I feel leans more towards something that is sort of a more mass appealing and likable, I do not find the smokiness of Born Aroma Ivory to be something challenging. Again, if you're absolutely allergic to anything smoky, then definitely stay away. But if you enjoy that stuff, then definitely make sure you check this one out. So what are my final thoughts based on my first impressions of Valentino Uomo Born Aroma Ivory? I think this is number one, very different if you compare it to the rest in the line. The final dry down on my skin has that really smooth, creamy kind of woodiness. The smokiness of it has softened up a bit. This is still a bit smoky, but I find the smokiness in the final dry down to be even more sort of a mass appealing, and it has actually turned quite ambery in the dry down. Now, if you're a subscriber, then you know that I do like Born Aroma Extra Dose. However, you also know that I felt that this was a bit too similar to previous releases, and I also felt that this turned a bit flat in the dry down. So Born Aroma Extra Dose, while smelling good, was, at least to me, a bit underwhelming. I know Extra Dose is the favorite of a lot of people. However, if you compare these two releases, this, to my nose, is a lot more unique. And having bought all the others in a line, I do feel that Born Aroma Ivory is a more interesting and better addition to the line than Extra Dose. Yeah, I said it, now you can go flame me in the comments. So I definitely enjoy Born Aroma Ivory. Now I would absolutely love to know how you feel about Born Aroma Ivory. Do you love it? Do you hate it? Do you think it's the worst in the line, or a bit like me, in that this is definitely something that moves away from the other ones and something that smells good and that's quite interesting? Let me know in the comments. Please drop a like and subscribe for more. Make sure you check out my full Valentino Uomo comparison over there, and I'll see you in the next one.